Well, thanks, Jackie, and thanks to all of you from SUNY Oswego for welcoming me. As was mentioned, I'm Carmen Mezzera, Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. We're the community of graduate schools around the world that specialize in international affairs with that professional focus. And so that's why I wanted to share with you here today some of the many, many different options within international affairs careers and help you think through what might make sense for you and then how to compete for those different opportunities. So with that, I wanted to jump right in and hopefully you all can see the slides on the screen. If not, give me some sort of signally sign. But how might you know is a great place to begin. How might you know if this field is the right place for you? Well, maybe you want to use your professional energy, not your personal time or your volunteer time, but your professional life to work on some of the big problems that we have in the world. Poverty, climate change. I think disease is one that we all feel quite personally these days, given the state of things. And maybe that's how you want to spend your professional journey, working on chipping away at some of those big pieces. Maybe you feel called to help people and you want to have that be a signature part of the work that you do. Maybe you're curious about the world and you want to explore it in all of its wonderful, amazing weirdness and all the different food and people and cultures and places that are out there. And you want to have that be a featured part of your professional life. Maybe you've seen how policy choices, whether it's in Albany or in DC or somewhere else, influence people's everyday lives. And you either want to be that decision maker or you want to be the person influencing that decision maker to make sure that choices as you would like to see them get taken. Maybe you're like me and you just like to argue, right? You love that back and forth and that debate and all of that energy that comes from totally convincing somebody that you're right. And maybe every so often letting your own mind be changed. And that's the kind of dynamism that you wanted to have as part of your professional journey. And maybe even if it's not any of these, you just want to leave the world better than you found it. And you want to play some role in being part of that positive change and positive influence on how the world plays out. And so whether it's any of these reasons or something else, there is a place and a space for you in the many options within international affairs. So as you think about the international affairs space, those of you who are studying international affairs or political science will know that just like the world, the study of international affairs is what we call interdisciplinary, right? There's history and politics and culture and language and business and trade. All of these pieces weave together as you're studying international issues. And the same thing is true as you think about the different career paths that are out there. Some of you may be familiar with careers in diplomacy or defense or development, but there is an international affairs element to so much more, to science and technology, energy, trade, business, education, law, communications. All of these pieces have a global element to them and global career possibilities within them. Because the field is so big, I will paint with a very broad brush and talk about 4 ways of organizing the space. These are not the only 4, and what you'll see is lots of movement across them and between them, but you'll hear me talk about careers in the public sector, local, state, national governments. You'll hear me talk about careers in the private sector, in the nonprofit sector, and then what I'm going to call the multilateral sector, by which I mean the World Bank and the UN and the IMF and all that whole family of intergovernmental institutions. Most people's journeys in our space are going to go across them and around them and between them. But just for the sake of organizing, you'll hear me talk about those 4 big buckets. But all of the career possibilities that you see here on the screen live in those 4 buckets and across those 4 buckets. So again, there's no one key way to put things in one specific space. And that's why for me, a better way of organizing your career energy and the way of thinking about your journey is actually around different problems that you might want to solve rather than which particular bucket you would want to live in. So maybe you love to write and you're curious about a particular part of the world and you want to put those 2 pieces together and be a human rights monitor and use the tools of clear and concise and articulate writing as a way of really illuminating what's going on in a particular place and in a particular space. And around that issue of human rights, around that issue of revealing what's really going on in a situation, you'll see jobs in the public sector. The Department of Labor, for example, handles most work on things like child labor, factory standards, what's going on in other countries in terms of human rights abuses, all of those kind of pieces on the labor side. You'll see it in the private sector. Every company from Apple to Facebook to Mars chocolates, all of them have a human rights team that go and look at what's going on in the world, produce reports, come to understand how their supply chains or their influence perpetuates a positive or a vicious element about human rights. You'll see it in the nonprofit sector. You'll see it in the multilateral sector as well. So that same issue is going to permeate all four of those, but you can find jobs and opportunities across those four still centered around that issue of human rights. The same thing is true, maybe you're really interested in computer science or information technology or cybersecurity, and you couple that with a study about security issues, and you can then similarly have opportunities in the public sector, whether it's working for one of the 18 different intelligence agencies that are just in the public sector, or one of the dozens and dozens of private sector intelligence agencies, or banks, or logistics companies, or all of these different pieces who do intelligence work. You'll find intelligence and cybersecurity work in the nonprofit sector, whether it's bringing the fight to others or protecting from particular aspects of cyber warfare. And you'll see it in the multilateral sector as well. So again, thinking about the kinds of problems you want to solve and the issues you want to weave together can be a way of centering your career search around a particular issue area and then looking across those sectors for opportunities, because there's going to be a lot of overlap among them, rather than trying to specifically say, I'm only going to do this kind of work, or I'm only going to do that kind of work in this particular bucket. So I'm happy when we get to Q&A to do some different exercises, a way to figure out what kind of problems you want to solve. But that can be an easier way of organizing your own search, rather than trying to think, well, I want to work for a .gov or a .com or a .org, something along those lines. I would argue, though, that no matter what kind of problem you want to solve or what kind of sector you want to do it in, there are 5 key things that everybody needs. Doesn't matter what kind of work you want to do, doesn't matter where you want to do it. These are critical skill sets that everybody is going to need. And so these are things you can build now to be competitive no matter what issues or what kind of sector you want to be working in. The first one is some exposure to professional life. Understanding what it is to have a boss, what it is to have coworkers, what it is to have colleagues and teammates. Being exposed to that sense of delivering on a particular product in that structure. In a perfect world, which we don't live in, we'd be able to do that in an international or in a multicultural context, because those elements are going to change. That idea about how you manage your boss, different ideas about power, different ideas about teamwork, different ideas about how you work together with others. So that element of professional experience, and you can get it in your work study, you can get it in different kinds of internships. All of these things are possible, but if you're able to do it in an international way, that's even better. The next skill set that I think everybody needs is the ability to communicate clearly and concisely in lots of different contexts. So the ability to write well. And I'm not talking about that 80-page paper that your faculty member might have you write. I'm talking about all of the information that's in that 80-page paper in a page and a half. Can you tell me all that you know about a particular subject in a clear and concise, easy to understand way, without me having to do all of the same research and all of the same learning that you had to do to produce that piece? Can you tell me your opinion? Tell me what you think I should do because of all of this information that you have. So if this is something you're not comfortable with now, I am sure there are tools and resources on campus, staff, faculty who can help you work on this. Because in international affairs in particular, so much of it is done in writing. The complement to that is the ability to speak comfortably in front of lots of different kinds of audiences, whether you have high school students in front of you or heads of state and government. Again, can you take all that you know about a subject and present it in a way that is clear and concise and compelling and is really going to keep their attention as you try to convey what you know and what you think about a particular subject? Again, that sort of cherry on top piece is the ability to do it in a language other than your native language. So the ability to write and to speak in multiple languages is, again, one of those pieces that helps to set you apart. But at a base level, the ability to write and speak comfortably and clearly is really critical. And if the speaking part in particular is something that scares the heck out of you, now while you're a student is a really great time. Volunteer to give the class presentation. You're in a safe space. You can start to work on the building that muscle memory to understand and be comfortable doing that in front of different kinds of groups of people. So we talked a little bit about the communication of language and using your language or foreign languages. But the other language that's really important, and that's why it's the third skill I think everybody needs, is the language of information. For some of you, that might be the quantitative, mathematical, computational piece. But for everybody, the ability to understand what's going on in a situation, to unpack it, to say, this is working, we need more of this, or to grow this. This is not working, we need to stop that or fix this. Really to unpack and to look into something, to understand what's going on, what you keep and what you get rid of. And then also the ability to understand what the technical and the math people are telling you is a really key piece, because there's so many different points of information, math or not, that are going to come at you in lots of different roles. And so the ability to really look into something and to unpack it and to understand it is really a key skill set. The complement to that is number 4, and it says understanding project management, but what that really means is the ability to take an idea that's in your head and make it a reality. Can you move something from point A to point Z? Can you marshal the human resources, the financial resources, the time to take something and bring it to life? You can do this in student clubs. You can do this in your faith community. You can do this by applying to fellowships or job opportunities, cases where you have to marshal lots of different pieces together. Even if you don't get that fellowship, even if you don't get that job, you're working on this skill set as a great way to practice moving things forward and bringing others and bringing things along with you. And then the last piece I think everybody needs, no matter what kind of role they want to have, is a network of people around them who simply know things that you don't know. And I recognize that sometimes networking has this connotation or this reputation of being just standing in dark rooms, holding drinks and eating small plates. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people around you who have attended an event, who've gone to a class, who've come to a session like this, who just have stuff that you haven't yet encountered or experienced, who can feed into your understanding of what's out there, your understanding of what's possible. So it's your classmates, it's your faculty, it's the staff, it's the alumni from the organization. All of them are there as a resource for you, even if it's not some deep relationship that you have, to just inform the choices that you know you can make and the opportunities that you have that are out there. So I would love to hear more about the questions that you have, and I'm seeing lots of great stuff in the chat. I'm going to keep going, but if there's anything really, really burning, Jackie, please do stop me, and I'll be able to come back to it. So I talked a little bit about what you need, which is always helpful, but the better question is, where do you get this? And I touched on these a little bit by talking about the value of internships and the value of work study. In terms of language and speaking and writing skills, if you yet haven't had a chance to study abroad, that can be a really great way to work on those cross-cultural skills, to work on some language, to work on your project management skills. To go abroad means to put together lots of different pieces and resources and all of that logistical component to move something forward, which is you going somewhere else. If you're later in your academic journey and you haven't had a chance to study abroad, thinking about different fellowship programs or different opportunities for you to get that international experience even after you're done, after you've graduated. It could be something like Peace Corps, which is about 2 years. It could be AmeriCorps. It could be a short-term 1-week volunteer opportunity. Lots of ways for you to have that international experience, have that project management experience, work on those language skills, either when you're still a student or afterwards. If something like that isn't possible, thinking about how you use the coursework you already have to do to enhance your professional development. So if you have to write that 80-page paper, can you take it and turn it into that page and a half blog post? Can you submit it to an undergraduate journal so that someone else can say, oh yeah, Megan did this great analysis and I really liked how she did this, and she had to put all these pieces together to submit the application. There's lots of journals looking to publish undergraduate work that you can submit to. You can do it through volunteer ops. We talked a little bit about things you can do in your faith community, things you can do with student clubs, lots of nonprofit organizations around you who are looking for people who even just want to do base level project work to take something from here to there. In some cases, physically to take it from here to there, but in also conceptually, oh, I have this idea, I want to make it a reality. And then in terms of the network around you, we talked about those who are in your immediate space, but there are also tons of young professionals groups who meet nationwide and who engage with young people across the country. It could be big, broad groups like young professionals in foreign policy. It could be really specific groups like women of color advancing peace and security. So whether you're interested in a topic as big as all of foreign policy or something as specific as peace and security, there's lots of different places and groups that you can tap into to start to build out your network. And then you can engage with them on different projects and use them to build out your professional experience and all of these different pieces. So there's ways to build these different muscle groups in your professional development with some things that can be very simple and straightforward. But I also know that we're in kind of a weird moment in the course of human history. And so there have been some things that have come from the pandemic that I think are really beneficial and also ways to gain that experience. And some things that also open more doors for you than maybe would have been open before. So one of the nice side benefits of the pandemic, I think, is that a lot of internships have moved to remote opportunities. And what that does is really two things. One, it gives you access to things right now from campus in a way that before were only for people who were physically in New York City or DC or Geneva or Tokyo or wherever. So you now have access to these things in just a different way than you did before. It's also helpful because we talked about the value of knowing how to manage a boss, how to work with a team, all of these pieces. The workplace of the future is going to be hybrid or remote. So remote internships are a great way for you to build up that skill set in terms of professional experience and be able to say to an employer down the line, oh no, I've worked with a remote team. I've done this and I was still able to do this and that and this other thing. So it really is the way the workforce is moving, and remote internships really let you practice that. There's also a lot going on right around you to get global experience and global exposure. So if you're not able to study abroad or you've been abroad and you're looking to keep those relationships alive, there's going to be groups that are working to resettle refugees, to work with immigrant communities. There's going to be groups at the local hospital, sometimes through the local police force, who are looking for people with language skills, who are looking for people with cross-cultural skills, who are looking for people who want to support international students who come to campus. Lots of ways for you to practice those global skills, to do some writing, to do some public speaking sometimes, do project management, all right around you without needing to go very far outside of campus. And I'm happy to talk about some of those different opportunities as well if that's beneficial when we get to Q&A. If none of that is possible, you can still, as I talked about, use the writing, the coursework you already have to do to build up your professional experience and exposure. Talk to your faculty, see what kinds of research projects they're working on and if you can get involved. Write for different blogs. So you have to, again, take all that knowledge and put it into a short, clear, easy to understand format. And you can do this in your jammies, from your dorm room, wherever you happen to find yourself, but it's a way to build out your portfolio and the access to professional experience that you've had. There's also lots of things called like freelance projects that are a specific deliverable, often paid, not always, where they ask you to do one specific task in a certain amount of time. There's also things like contract work, where you ask to do a lot of things over a specific period of time, but it's a number of different projects that you have to deliver. So those can be particularly helpful if the thought of working for free or working, in your spare time or just kind of doing stuff isn't necessarily possible. Those are also ways to often get paid while you're continuing to build up your portfolio. And you can pick and choose which time frame works for you. Oh, I have this amount of time in between this class and this sports season or whatever it is to continue to build out those pieces. And then I talked about some of the nationwide young professionals groups. But one of the other nice benefits of the pandemic is that activities and events and conferences, all of which used to be tied to one specific place and space, are now broadcast online and available at any time of day, wherever you happen to be. So you can watch that panel from Geneva on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And you can hear, how do they talk about issues? What are the terms that they use? Where are they projecting that this space is moving? And so you can build up your professional understanding that way. And you can write to the speaker and say, oh, Dr. So-and-so, I saw you talk on this panel. I really liked your point about this. I was surprised you didn't mention that thing. Can I come talk to you? And it lets you build out your network that way, in a way that before you had to be in that room at that time in order to start that relationship. So there's lots of nice side benefits to the pandemic that can help you move forward professionally across these different skill sets that I think you're going to need, no matter what kind of job you want to have. I want to very briefly touch on things like cover letter and resume and interviews. And then I really welcome whatever questions that you all might have about how we can help you kind of get started in this space. I'm sure you get a lot of this from your career office. You should definitely engage with them and draw on their best resources. But as someone who's done a lot of hiring, I wanted to share some of it from my perspective as the person who receives all of those applications and resumes that you all turn in. Every organization is going to ask for something different. So at a bare minimum, just follow directions and you will immediately set yourself apart from so many of your competitors who could not handle just basically following directions. But because every organization is different, it's really going to depend on what they want. But on the whole, some common things they're going to ask for: a cover letter, a resume, or a CV. They are different things. So again, follow directions. Some are going to want to see transcripts from every institution that you've attended. So if you did community college first, you may need those. If you did the study abroad and directly enrolled in an institution, you may need those. It may be official, it may be unofficial. Again, understanding what they're looking for can be really helpful. Many of them might look for a writing sample. And so this is something that you can really plan in advance for. If you have that 80-page paper that you just think is amazing, are there 2 to 5 really solid pages that you could use as a writing sample? And maybe you need to tweak the beginning a little bit, maybe you need to tweak the ending a little bit so that it stands on its own. But can you think back on the things that you have created in your time as a student, as an intern, working for this organization or doing this or doing that, that you can have in your pocket whenever a writing sample is really useful? And if you haven't yet thought of things in that way, now's a good time to go back through and say, oh yeah, I was really proud of that. And here's a good piece of it I could use for a writing sample. And the same thing is true when it comes to references. For those of you who are later in your journey, are there faculty that you absolutely want to stay in relationship with, that you had a good experience, that you created some great projects for? You need to be intentional about staying in relationship with them, keeping those relationships alive, because in 2 years, 1 year, 6 months, when you need a reference for them, you don't want to have them say, who? Which one are you? What's going on? You need to be in contact with them. And that doesn't have to be every week. It doesn't have to be every month. It can be, every 6 months, once a year. Some people do it around different holidays. For me, I get a lot of really snarky emails around the beginning of football season because my interns and the folks who've worked for me know of my great love of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so usually as football season starts, I get a lot of trash talk, but it gives me a chance to say, oh, Marie, how are you? What have you been up to? What are you doing? And it gives me a chance to reconnect so that when someone calls me for a reference, I can say, yeah, I've been in touch with her and she's been doing this and she's over here doing that. It gives me some reason to catch up with you. So you have to be deliberate about staying in touch with those folks. And if you're earlier in your academic journey, as you go through your time thinking about who those people are that you want to stay in relationship with is really, really critical. But in terms of the application materials themselves, I need to stress to you that a cover letter is not about you. You may think it's about you, but it's not. Your cover letter is about me. as the employer and what you can do for me to make my work and my life better and easier. So I usually recommend a 5-paragraph model, right? First paragraph, okay, that one can be a little bit about you. Why should I keep reading about you? What is in it for me to keep reading about you? The middle section is going to be, that's going to be very much about me as an employer. You know what I want because you've seen it in the job description. And what can you do to help me get those things? So the more parallels, the clearer you can make it. I asked for this, you have that. I asked for this other thing, here it is. That middle section really has to be great parallels between what I've got, what I'm after, and what you have. And then the last bit, that's about us. What can we do together if I pick you that's going to make me better at my mission and you better able to contribute to it? So a little bit about you, a whole lot about me, and a closeout about us. To me, that structure for a cover letter is a really clear and easy way for me as an employer to see, oh, I should want to talk more to you. I should want to get to know you a bit better, because the whole point of the cover letter and the resume is to get you the interview. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. The same thing is going to be true when it comes to your resume. That resume should be clear, should be easy to skim and follow. They say you get about 8 seconds, right, of a review time with a resume. And I'm going to look at it and decide in that 8 seconds whether I delete it or whether I read it again. So for most of you at this point in your journey, it should be one page. I don't need to know what you did in the 4th grade. I don't need to know. No, give it to me short and clear and tight what it is that you are going to contribute to my organization. Obviously, it should be free of typos and mistakes, and it should be full of details. Who, what, when, where, how much, what were the results? You may not think that there are numbers that you can put on every situation, but there's always going to be details that you can give me that help me measure what you've done relative to what I'm after. You know, taught 15 second graders math after school 3 hours a week. That is, it's a who, it's a what, it's a when. It gives me very clear indicators of what you've been responsible for and what you've been able to achieve. So the more you can ground it in details and information, the stronger and clearer that resume is going to be. And the resume and the cover letter, like I said, live together for the purpose of getting you the interview, not the job. So I don't need to know your whole life story in either of those documents, because the point of them is for me to want to talk more with you, to hear more about you. And that's going to happen in the interview. If you are lucky enough to get the interview, they're going to do homework on you. They're going to probably look you up on LinkedIn. They're going to look and try to understand what you've done in the past. And you need to do your homework about them. Not just knowing the job description and thinking about things that you can connect between what you've done and that job and that organization. But if you can find out who the interviewer is. Oh, I see you did this thing. I've similarly done that thing. You went here. I've been there, whatever it is. Coming to know the company. And again, that's not just what's in the job description, but read the About Us page on their website. Read the history if they have such a thing on their website. And start to think again about those points of connection. Oh, you did this, I've done that. Oh, I've always been interested in this thing or whatever. You can guess at some of the questions they're going to ask you in the interview. And if not, there's a million job boards that list the 50 most commonly asked interview questions. So coming prepared by thinking about those points of connection to the mission, to the history, to the person is just going to help you make it, again, really clear for them to see why they're a fit for you and you're a fit for them. Because again, they're going to be doing this homework about you, so you also need to do it about them. I talked a little bit about references, but the last piece I want to say is please don't ask your grandma. I'm sure she loves you and I'm sure she thinks you're amazing, but that's not the kind of reference that I'm after. I'm looking for faculty. I'm looking for internship supervisors. I'm looking for job supervisors if you've worked retail or in an office. People who can testify to who you are as a work colleague and that you can deliver on the kinds of professional things I'm after. So again, I'm sure your grandma loves you, but she may not be the most reliable resource in terms of what kind of professional colleague you are. And that's also true in terms of not needing to just go after the most famous name that you can find. If that famous name, if the best that they can say is, Jackie is nice, she came to work, that's not nearly as helpful as someone who maybe isn't famous, but can really tell me who you are and what you're capable of. That's the point of the reference. But it takes planning to think about who those people are and who they're going to be able to, who are really going to be able to testify on your behalf to an employer. Because until I hire you, I won't know that. So I have to rely on others who've worked with you, but what you're like and whether you really are the way you seem to be in the application. I want to just wrap up by sharing a few of the many different resources that we have at APSIA, and then I look forward to answering whatever questions you might have. As was mentioned, we're the association primarily for graduate schools worldwide. So we do lots of events throughout the year to give you a chance, if you think graduate school is going to be part of your journey, to connect with those schools and start to build a relationship with them and find ways to figure out which program, if any, makes sense for you. I talked about the importance of studying abroad or going on fellowship programs, and we list on our website lots of different programs that are going to fund research or internships or time overseas for you, if that's something that you think makes sense. All of our schools have profiles on our site, so if you think this is something that you want to do, it can be a really easy one-stop shop to just figure out who's been vetted for both their professional focus as well as the depth of the international affairs work that they do. And as we go through and we talk more about careers, you can find lots more information in our online career guide. And then we have a job and internship board on our site where members and partners post opportunities all the time, from those remote internships to full-time roles, all the way up to faculty positions and fellowships and postdocs. So lots of different possibilities there. And then we're as active as we can be on social media, putting out lots of content, events, stories about alumni and students and what they're up to, jobs, internships, fellowships. So I invite you to follow us on all of those different channels as a way to stay in touch and to keep learning about all of the different possibilities that are out there. And if nothing else, you can see my email here on the screen. I welcome to connect with you one-on-one. We also do every month a session called Best Practices in Applying to Graduate School. And we do open office hours every month. So you can come by if you think of a question in 3 days and just pose it to me or a member of my team. And we're happy to do our best to answer whatever we can. And so with that, I want to stop sharing and I invite Jackie to stop the recording, and I look forward to answering whatever questions I can.